In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the rear brake caliper on this Ford F-150. Keep in mind, we are working with the early half of this generation, 09 to 2011, which had this style rear differential. If you have a 2012 to 2014, you will have a different style. So make sure you have the right part for your truck. Let's get started. Use your 21mm socket, remove all 6 of your lug nuts, and then remove the wheel. Let's break the banjo bolt free. I'm going to use a 14mm socket to do this. You can use a wrench. Breaking it free now allows you to have an easier time removing it once the caliper is off of the vehicle. I'm snugging it back up just so it doesn't leak brake fluid everywhere, but I'm going to leave it as is for now. Now let's take the caliper off. 2 10mm bolts hold this onto the backing plate. This is what the bracket is in this case. So break those free. You can use a socket or a wrench on the bottom. Take this one out on the top. You're basically limited to a wrench, an open-ended wrench on here. You can also pop the cover off of this and then put a T30 socket in there, but most of the time you can just get it with a 10mm wrench. This also provides you with some nice leverage to spin this bolt out by hand, but you cannot remove it all the way because the leaf spring is going to be in the way. So we're going to leave this in here. It'll come out with the caliper. Let's take the bottom one off, and then we should be able to pull the caliper right off. This one, of course, you can remove all the way. There's nothing in the way. Get the caliper to swing up or swing out from the bottom, and then pull it down and off. At this point, you can remove this, set it aside. Make sure they're in good condition. These are pretty narrow, thin bolts, so if they're rotted, corroded in any way, discard them, get new ones. And now we have to get the pads out so we can put them in the new caliper. All you have to do is just pry this one in and out. And then this one should slide straight down. Now sometimes you may need a hammer for this just because these are pretty tough in here. So yep, gonna grab a hammer and pop this pad out. There we go. Now let's lubricate the slider pins. I'm going to pop that one out, add some grease in here. Now, yeah, they do come with a little bit of grease from the factory, but I like to add extra grease. Work it into the boot, push that through. Any excess grease will come right out. Let's do the other side as well. I'm using high temperature brake rated silicone paste. Make sure whatever you're using is rated for high temperature. Otherwise it can melt as the brakes get hot. That would not be good. I'll just put the extra on here. You don't have to coat the face of the piston if you don't want to, but sometimes it does help with noise reduction. Anyway, let's pop this one out. Do the same on this side. Add some grease in there. And the other end of it. Okay, center the slider pins again, and now it's time to put the pads in. Start with the inner pad. This one has the 3 prongs that clips in. Just slide it in. And then the outer pad has these 2 pins that have to line up with these holes, and then the clip hooks it onto the outside. So it goes like this, and you slide it down. Sometimes it takes quite a bit of force. There we go. If you don't have to, try not to hammer it. Sometimes it can disturb the pad material. But there we go. This is properly installed now. Take a pry bar, pop these shims off. There we go. And do the same to the top one. Sometimes they're a little rusty here. That's why it's important to clean this up very well. However, when you clean it, don't sand too much. If you sand too much, you need a new backing plate, because this is not just the caliper bracket or, well, the area where the pads slide, but it's also the backing plate. So if you sand too much, you remove too much material. Now those shims are floating. not good. So you just want to clean it up lightly. I'm going to start with a wire brush. If that is not enough, then I will very gently sand or use a file, but you don't want to just grind it down. I'm going to wet this down with some brake parts cleaner to prevent the dust. Okay, if I hammer it down, it'll go down. It looks like I do have to sand just a little bit. So I'm going to grab a very fine, worn sanding disc and just clean up the outer part of it, just a little skim, and that should be good. I'm happy with this. Let's put some grease on so that it hopefully slows the rust down a little bit. It's all right if you put too much, it'll just squeeze out, and then you can wipe it off. Now, put this new shim on, tap it down. That's perfect. Let's do the same to the top one. When you mount the caliper, pay attention to the top of this pad right here. It has two hooks, so the top of the outer pad. So that has to go in first, and then this one doesn't matter because it only has one. At the bottom, they only have one. So basically, it has to go up and then slide or pivot down. So if it doesn't fit, it's because the slider pins are in the way. That's hooked on perfectly. Push this one out of the way, and then, oh, there you have it. Just fell right in place. So that's perfect. Oh, however, I forgot to put the top bolt in. Make sure you slide that through. Now, hook it on. There we go. All right, because this one doesn't have enough clearance. So, start that in. That one started. Let's start this bottom one as well. And I'm just gonna take my wrench, make sure that they're actually tightened properly. The torque for these is going to be 22 foot-pounds. I cannot torque the top one. Even if I use the T30 cutout on the inside of that boot, I can't torque it just because the clearance between the leaf spring does not allow me to get a torque wrench in there. So I'm just going to do my best to get it nice and tight with the wrench. 22 foot-pounds is not a whole lot. So there we go. Just make it nice and snug. I'm going to snug this one up as well. I'm going to come back and torque it. Okay, take the new banjo bolt off, as well as these washers. You don't want to reuse the old washers, so make sure that you have adequate hardware. Okay, there we go. Set that aside. Let's take the old banjo bolt and the hose off of this old caliper. Since we have a new banjo bolt, I'm going to throw this one out, recycle that, pull the hose off. And you want to make sure that you take these copper washers off of the hose. Looks like both of these are stuck on the hose. Sometimes you can tap them off. These are pretty stuck. So I'm going to grab some pliers and pinch them with some pliers. Oh, there's that. The surface looks very good underneath that, so I'm not worried about it. Let's do the same to the other side. Now get the new banjo bolt with a new washer. Make sure you're facing it the right way, so the hose needs to swoop around like this. Has a little flat spot at the bottom that needs to face outward. And before you put it in, make sure you put the other copper washer on, just like that. Hold the hose so that it's lined up, and start the bolt in. 30 foot-pounds is the torque for this. That's it right there. Clean this off with a brake parts cleaner. That way you don't confuse the residual fluid for a potential brake leak. And after you ensure that it's not leaking from anywhere around the hose, let's open up the bleeder screw do a gravity bleed, and it's important to do a full manual brake bleed so that you can eliminate all the air out of the system. Take the bleeder screw cap off, use a 10mm socket, open it up. Now we'll let gravity pull the fluid into the caliper and push the air up and out of the bleeder screw. Once we get a steady trickle of fluid, you're going to want to perform a full manual brake bleed. I recommend bleeding all 4 brakes. Now that we have a steady trickle of fluid, close up the bleeder screw. Snug it, perform your full manual brake bleed. That way you can ensure all the air is out of the system. With that done, rinse everything off. Reinstall the bleeder screw cap. It's important that way debris doesn't clog it up. Now let's put the wheel on. Let's get the wheel back on. Put on all 6 of your lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern and also in a cross pattern. Torque them to 150 foot-pounds. Once again, 150 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Double check it if you want. If not, don't forget to pump up your brakes so you can seat those pads up against the rotor and take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.